Snow came down hard over the Blackridge Valley, and Luna pressed her body against a cracked boulder, trying to stay warm. She was not inside the den with the rest of the pack. She was outside, where she always was, because that was where an Omega belonged. The wind cut across the rocks like a blade. Somewhere behind her, inside the warm den, she could hear the pack settling down for the night. She could hear soft breathing, contented sighs, the shifting of bodies pressed close together for warmth. She heard all of it, and none of it was for her. Luna had been born into the Blackridge pack 6 winters ago, and for 6 winters she had lived on the edge of everything. She was not sick. She was not weak. She simply carried the lowest rank a wolf could carry, and in this pack, that meant she ate last, if she ate at all. It meant she slept alone, no matter how cold the night became. It meant that when something went wrong, whether it was a missed hunt or a sick pup or bad weather, the blame always found its way back to her. She had stopped asking why a long time ago. Some things simply were the way they were, and questioning them only made the nights longer. Tonight, the cold felt sharper than usual. Luna curled her tail around her paws and lowered her head, trying to disappear into herself the way she had learned to do. She thought about the warmth just beyond the rock wall, so close and so impossibly far. She thought about how her mother used to nuzzle her when she was small, before her mother had died, and left her with no one to stand for her in the pack. Rank had come down hard after that. Without a protector, Luna had sunk to the very bottom, and she had stayed there ever since. A sound broke through the wind. It was faint, almost swallowed by the storm, but Luna's ears turned toward it instantly. It sounded like a cry. She lifted her head and listened harder. The wind howled again, and for a moment, she thought she had imagined it. Then it came once more, thin and strained, carried from somewhere down the ridge. Every instinct told her to stay where she was. It was dangerous to move alone in a storm like this. There could be other predators caught in the same weather, desperate and hungry. There could be a cliff edge hidden under fresh snow. There could be 100 reasons to stay still and let the sound fade into the wind like everything else in her life had faded. But something in that cry pulled at her. It was small. It was frightened. It reminded her, in some strange way, of herself. Luna rose to her feet, her legs stiff from the cold, and began to move along the ridge, staying low against the rocks to avoid the worst of the wind. Snow bit into her paws with every step, but she kept going, following the sound as it grew slightly louder, then faded again, carried by the shifting gusts. She thought of her pack, warm and dry behind her. She thought of the alpha, a broad-shouldered wolf named Garrick, who had never once looked at her with anything other than irritation. She thought of the others, Bryony and Fenwick, and old Hollis, who barely acknowledged her presence except to remind her of her place. None of them would come looking if she vanished tonight. None of them would notice until the next hunt, when there would be one less set of paws to help drive the prey. That thought did not sting the way it once had. Luna had made peace with her loneliness, the same way she had made peace with the cold. She simply carried it with her, the way she carried everything else. The cry came again, closer now. Luna quickened her pace, moving through a thicket of frozen brush that scraped against her fur. She pushed through, ignoring the sting, and came out into a small clearing, where the wind seemed to swirl in every direction at once. There, half buried in snow, was the source of the sound. It was a pup. He could not have been more than a few weeks old, far too young to be alone in weather like this. His fur was a light gray, matted with ice, and his small body trembled violently as he let out another weak cry. His eyes were barely open, and when Luna approached, he did not even try to move away. He simply lay there, shaking, as if he had already given up. Luna stopped a few feet away, her heart pounding. She scanned the clearing quickly, searching for any sign of an adult wolf nearby. There was nothing. No tracks leading away. No scent trail she could follow back to a den. Whatever had happened to this pup's family, they were not close enough to help him now. She thought of the rival pack that lived across the far ridge, the one Garrick called enemies simply because their territory bordered Blackridge land. She had caught glimpses of their scent before, carried on the wind during certain seasons. This pup's scent was unfamiliar, foreign, marked with something that told her instantly he did not belong to her pack. If Garrick knew a pup from another pack was lying helpless nearby, he would tell her to leave it. Worse, he might tell her to make sure it never grew up to become a threat. That was simply how the packs treated one another out here. Territory was survival, and survival left little room for mercy toward outsiders. Luna knew all of this. She had heard Garrick say as much more times than she could count, warning the younger wolves about the dangers of the pack across the ridge, filling their heads with suspicion before they were even old enough to hunt. And yet, looking at the small, shivering body in front of her, Luna could not make herself care about borders or rivalries, or the unspoken rules of pack life. All she could see was a creature, smaller and more helpless than herself, freezing to death in a storm that showed no sign of slowing. She took a slow step forward. The pup flinched, but he was too weak to do much more than that. Luna lowered her head until she was close enough to feel the faint warmth still clinging to his small body, fading fast in the cold air. For a long moment, she simply stood there, caught between every instinct that told her to walk away and something deeper, something she could not quite name, that told her she could not leave him. She thought about her own place in the world. She was the lowest of the low, the wolf nobody wanted, the one blamed for every misfortune that touched the pack. If she was caught helping an enemy pup survive, there was no telling what punishment Garrick might decide was fitting. She might be driven out entirely. She might lose what little place she had left. But what place did she really have to lose? She slept alone every night. She ate scraps when there were any to spare. She had spent 6 years being treated as though she barely existed at all. If she turned away now, if she left this pup to freeze simply because the pack said he was an enemy, what exactly would she be protecting? Luna made her decision before she even realized she had made it. She lowered herself onto the snow beside the pup and curled her body around him, shielding him from the worst of the wind. He was so small that he fit entirely within the curve of her frame, and slowly, she felt his shivering begin to ease as her warmth reached him. He let out one more soft sound, quieter now, less desperate. Then his breathing steadied, and he pressed instinctively closer to her, seeking the heat of her body the way any pup would seek out its mother. Luna stayed there through the worst of the storm, ignoring the cold that continued to bite at her own exposed side. She kept watch, ears turned toward every sound in the darkness, ready to protect the small creature curled against her, even though she had no claim to him, and no idea what tomorrow would bring. As the night wore on, her thoughts drifted back to the pack, to the warm den she had been shut out of, to the wolves, who had never once made room for her. She thought about how strange it was that the first creature to truly need her, to truly depend on her for survival, was one she was not even supposed to acknowledge existed. Somewhere deep inside her, something shifted. For 6 years, Luna had been told she mattered least of all. Tonight, curled around a helpless pup in the middle of a storm, she felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. She felt needed. The storm raged on for hours, but Luna did not move from her spot. She adjusted her position occasionally, making sure the pup remained shielded from the worst of the wind, but she never once considered leaving him. Exhaustion pulled at her, and hunger gnawed at her stomach, but neither was strong enough to break her resolve. Toward the deepest part of the night, the wind finally began to ease. The snow still fell, but softer now, drifting down in gentle flakes instead of driving sideways in violent gusts. Luna lifted her head slightly and looked down at the pup sleeping against her side. His breathing was steady. His small body had stopped trembling. Whatever had separated him from his family, whatever storm or misfortune had left him alone on this ridge, he had survived the worst of it. She did not know what she would do when morning came. She did not know how she would explain his presence if anyone in the pack discovered him, or how she would keep him fed and safe in the days ahead. She only knew that leaving him now, after everything, was no longer something she was capable of doing. As the first pale hint of dawn began to touch the horizon, Luna closed her eyes, still curled protectively around the sleeping pup, and allowed herself, for the first time in longer than she could remember, to feel something other than alone. Morning light spread slowly across the valley, and Luna knew she had only a short time before the rest of the pack woke and began moving about their territory. She looked down at the pup still sleeping against her side, his small chest rising and falling with steady breaths, and she understood that the hardest part of the night was already over. The hardest part of the day was only beginning. She could not simply walk back into the heart of Blackridge territory with an unfamiliar pup at her side. Someone would see. Someone would smell the foreign scent clinging to his fur, and once that happened, there would be no explaining her way out of it. Luna gently nudged the pup awake. He opened his eyes, still cloudy with sleep, and looked up at her without fear, as if he had already decided, somewhere in the depths of the storm, that she was safe. That small trust settled something in her chest, a feeling she did not have time to examine closely. She needed to find a place to hide him, somewhere close enough that she could return to him often, but far enough from the main den that no one would stumble upon him by accident. Her mind raced through the terrain she knew, searching for somewhere secluded. There was a narrow hollow beneath a fallen tree, not far from where she often wandered alone, during the long hours when the pack had no use for her. It was small, sheltered from wind, and hidden behind a curtain of frozen roots. It would do, at least for now. She nudged the pup gently with her nose, urging him to follow her. He struggled to his feet, wobbling on legs still weak from cold and hunger, and took a few uncertain steps before nearly collapsing. Luna crouched low, allowing him to lean against her side, and slowly, carefully, they made their way toward the hollow. It took longer than she wanted. Every sound in the forest made her ears twitch with alertness. Every shift in the wind carried the risk of a scent trail leading straight back to her. But at last, they reached the fallen tree, and Luna guided the pup into the small space beneath it, watching as he curled up gratefully in the dry leaves that had gathered there. He looked so small in that hollow, so fragile against the rough bark surrounding him. Luna settled beside him for a moment, letting him rest, before she reluctantly pulled away. She needed food, both for herself and for him. A pup his age needed nourishment far more substantial than what she could easily provide. But she would find a way. She always found a way to survive on scraps. This would be no different, except now there were 2 mouths to feed instead of 1. Luna made her way back toward the main territory, doing her best to appear as though nothing unusual had happened during the night. She kept her head low, her pace even, betraying none of the exhaustion pulling at her limbs. As she approached the den, she saw the pack beginning to stir, shaking snow from their coats, exchanging low grumbles about the storm that had passed through. Garrick emerged from the den first, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow across the snow. His eyes found Luna almost immediately, narrowing with the same disdain he always carried when looking at her. "Where were you?" he said, though it was less a question and more an accusation. "Outside," Luna answered simply. It was the truth, if not the whole of it. Garrick grunted, clearly uninterested in pressing further. To him, Luna's whereabouts rarely mattered unless something had gone wrong that could be blamed on her. Today, nothing appeared to have gone wrong, at least not that he could see, so he turned away and began organizing the morning hunt. Luna joined the hunting group, as she always did, positioned at the back where the Omega belonged, given the least favorable angle to chase prey and the smallest share when the hunt succeeded. She moved through the motions carefully, her mind only half focused on the task at hand. The other half remained with the small hidden pup waiting for her return. The hunt that morning went reasonably well. The pack managed to bring down a young deer weakened by the storm, and for once, there was enough meat that even Luna received a small portion, once the higher-ranking wolves had eaten their fill. She ate quickly, forcing herself to swallow more than she normally would, knowing she needed the strength for what came next. As the pack settled to rest after the hunt, satisfied and lazy in the pale winter sun, Luna slipped away unnoticed, carrying a small piece of meat she had managed to save without drawing attention. She moved swiftly through the trees, retracing her path back toward the hollow beneath the fallen tree. The pup was awake when she arrived, peering out from beneath the roots with wide, uncertain eyes. When he caught sight of her, something in his posture shifted, a small wag of his tail, a soft sound of recognition. Luna felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest at the sight. She dropped the meat in front of him, and he devoured it eagerly, far hungrier than she had realized. Watching him eat, Luna understood that keeping him alive would require more than she could easily manage alone. He needed regular food, warmth, and protection from the many dangers that roamed the forest, dangers that had little patience for a defenseless pup. Over the following days, Luna developed a careful routine. She would join the pack for hunts and gatherings, doing enough to avoid suspicion, then slip away whenever she found a spare moment to check on the pup, bringing him whatever food she could gather without drawing attention to herself. It was not easy. There were nights when she barely slept, torn between resting her own exhausted body and making sure the pup remained safe and warm through the bitter cold. There were days when hiding her comings and goings from the rest of the pack required more careful planning than she had ever needed for anything in her life. But slowly, the pup grew stronger. His legs became steadier beneath him, his coat, once matted and thin, began to fill out with healthier growth. His eyes, once clouded with exhaustion, grew brighter and more alert with each passing day. Luna began to notice small things about him that she had not registered during that first desperate night. He had a habit of tilting his head whenever she spoke to him, as though trying to understand every sound she made. He liked to nose at loose stones and leaves, exploring the small world of the hollow with clumsy curiosity. And whenever she returned to him after time away, he would greet her with an enthusiasm that made the risks she was taking feel entirely worthwhile. She began calling him Wisp, a small private name she used only when they were alone together, inspired by the way he seemed to appear and vanish through the underbrush like a wisp of fog. The bond between them grew stronger with each visit. Luna had spent 6 years believing herself unworthy of companionship, convinced that her place among the Blackridge pack was simply to endure whatever treatment came her way without complaint. But in the quiet hours she spent with Wisp, hidden away from the judgment of the others, she began to feel something she had almost forgotten existed within her. She felt valued, not by the pack that had cast her aside, but by this small creature who depended entirely on her kindness and care. Still, the danger of discovery never fully left her thoughts. Every trip to the hollow carried risk. Every scrap of food she saved could be noticed by sharper eyes than she anticipated. She knew that sooner or later, someone in the pack would grow suspicious of her frequent absences, and she had no plan for what would happen when that moment arrived. One afternoon, as she made her way back from the hollow after a longer visit than usual, she caught sight of Bryony, watching her from a distance, her expression unreadable. Luna's heart skipped, and she forced herself to walk calmly, betraying nothing, even as her mind raced through every possible explanation she might need to offer. Bryony said nothing that day, simply turned and continued about her business, but the encounter left Luna shaken. She understood, in that moment, that her secret would not remain hidden forever. Sooner or later, choices would need to be made, and she would need to decide exactly how far she was willing to go to protect the small life she had chosen to save. For now, though, she pushed the worry aside and focused on what mattered most. Wisp was alive. Wisp was growing stronger. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Luna had something in her life worth protecting, no matter the cost that protection might eventually demand of her. That night, as she curled up beside Wisp in the quiet safety of the hollow, listening to his soft breathing beside her, Luna allowed herself a rare moment of peace. Whatever challenges awaited her in the days ahead, she knew now that she would face them, because walking away from this small pup was no longer something she was capable of doing. The storm that had once threatened to take his life had instead given her something she never expected to find. It had given her purpose, and Luna intended to hold on to that purpose with everything she had left to give. Bryony's silence did not last. 3 days after that unsettling encounter in the woods, Luna returned from the hollow to find the older wolf waiting for her near the edge of the clearing, her posture stiff and deliberate. "You have been disappearing," Bryony said, her voice low enough that only Luna could hear. "Every day, sometimes twice. I am not the only one who has noticed." Luna's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression steady. "I go where I please. No one has ever cared enough to ask before." "They will care," Bryony said, "if what you are hiding puts this pack in danger." The words landed like a blow. Luna searched the older wolf's face, trying to determine how much she actually knew, but Bryony's expression remained frustratingly unreadable. Had she followed her? Had she caught the scent of another pack's pup clinging to Luna's fur? There was no way to know for certain, and asking directly felt too dangerous. "I am not putting anyone in danger," Luna said finally, choosing her words with care. Bryony studied her for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word, leaving Luna standing alone, with her heart pounding against her ribs. That evening, Luna made her way to the hollow with more caution than usual, doubling back twice along the way, to make certain no one followed her. Wisp greeted her with his usual enthusiasm, bounding out from beneath the fallen tree, with a confidence that had grown considerably over the past several days. He was stronger now, quick on his feet, curious about everything around him. Watching him grow gave Luna a fierce sense of pride, but tonight, that pride was tangled with fear. She settled beside him, allowing him to lean against her while she thought through what Bryony's warning might mean. If suspicion had already begun spreading through the pack, it was only a matter of time before someone discovered the truth. She needed to prepare herself for that possibility, though she had no clear idea of what preparation could possibly look like. Wisp nudged her side gently, sensing perhaps that something weighed on her mind. Luna lowered her head and pressed her nose briefly against his fur, drawing comfort from his presence, even as her thoughts churned with worry. "We will figure this out," she murmured to him, though she was not entirely certain she believed her own words. Over the following days, Luna noticed subtle changes in how the pack treated her. Glances lingered a moment too long. Conversations quieted slightly when she passed by. Nothing overt, nothing she could point to directly, but enough to confirm that Bryony's warning had not been idle speculation. Someone, somewhere within the pack, suspected that Luna was keeping a secret. She considered, more than once, whether it might be safer to move Wisp further away, to find a new hiding place, beyond the reach of Blackridge territory entirely. But the thought of navigating unfamiliar land with a still-growing pup, exposed to whatever dangers lurked beyond the borders she knew, felt just as risky as staying where she was. Instead, she doubled her efforts to remain unnoticed, timing her visits carefully around the pack's routines, choosing paths through the forest that offered the least visibility. It was exhausting work, balancing the demands of pack life with the secret responsibility she had taken on, but she managed it, day after day, driven by a determination she had not known she possessed. Wisp, for his part, continued to thrive under her care. His legs had grown steady and strong, capable of carrying him across the hollow and back with playful energy. His coat had filled out into a healthy gray, marked with patches slightly darker around his ears and along his spine. His eyes, once dull with exhaustion, now held a bright alertness that missed very little of what happened around him. He had also begun to show small signs of the wolf he would eventually become. He would crouch low in the leaves, watching insects with intense focus before pouncing with clumsy determination. He practiced growling, producing sounds far too small to be intimidating, though Luna always responded with appropriate seriousness, careful never to make him feel foolish for trying. These quiet moments, hidden away from the judgment of the pack, became the brightest parts of Luna's days. For the first time since her mother's passing, she felt something resembling happiness, however fragile and hidden it needed to remain. But fragile happiness rarely survives untested, and Luna knew better than to believe her secret could last forever. The test came on a cold afternoon when Luna returned to the main den later than usual, having stayed with Wisp longer than she intended after he had grown restless and required extra comfort. As she approached the clearing where the pack gathered, she immediately sensed something was wrong. The air felt tense, charged with an energy she recognized from times when trouble had found its way into the pack before. Garrick stood at the center of the clearing, his posture rigid, his eyes scanning the gathered wolves with obvious displeasure. When his gaze landed on Luna, something in his expression made her stomach drop. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his voice carrying none of the casual dismissal he usually reserved for her. "Walking," Luna said carefully, "as I often do." "Walking," Garrick repeated, his tone sharp with disbelief. "Fenwick found tracks near the old fallen tree by the eastern ridge. Small tracks, pup tracks, tracks that do not belong to any pup born within this pack." Luna's blood ran cold. She kept her expression as neutral as she could manage, though her heart pounded so loudly she feared everyone present could hear it. "I do not know what you are referring to," she said, the lie feeling clumsy and unconvincing, even to her own ears. Garrick took a step closer, his presence looming over her in a way that made every instinct in her body want to shrink back and disappear. "You have been seen leaving the territory almost daily. You return smelling of something unfamiliar. And now there are pup tracks near a hollow you frequent more than anywhere else. Do not insult me by pretending ignorance." The clearing had gone completely silent. Every wolf in the pack had turned to watch, their attention fixed on the confrontation unfolding before them. Luna felt the weight of their collective gaze pressing down on her, each pair of eyes carrying judgment she had grown accustomed to over the years, though never quite like this. She thought of Wisp, waiting for her in the hollow, unaware of the danger closing in around them both. She thought of every risk she had taken over the past days, every careful lie she had told to protect him, and she thought, with a clarity that surprised her, that she would not deny what she had done, not when denial meant abandoning him entirely. "There is a pup," Luna admitted, her voice steadier than she expected. "I found him abandoned during the storm. He would have died without help." A murmur rippled through the gathered wolves. Garrick's expression darkened further, his jaw tightening with barely controlled anger. "A pup from where?" he demanded. "From whose pack?" Luna hesitated, knowing that whatever answer she gave would only make things worse, but she refused to lie further. "I do not know for certain, but his scent was unfamiliar. He may belong to the pack across the ridge." The murmur turned into open muttering, wolves exchanging alarmed glances at the confirmation of what many had clearly already suspected. Garrick's eyes narrowed to slits, his entire body tense with barely restrained fury. "You have been harboring an enemy pup," he said slowly, each word deliberate and cold. "Within our own territory, without informing anyone." "He is not an enemy," Luna said, her voice rising slightly despite her best efforts to remain calm. "He is a pup. He was helpless. He would have died." "That is not your decision to make," Garrick snapped. "Pack law exists for a reason. Outsiders are not to be harbored, especially not the offspring of a rival pack. You know this. You have always known this." Luna felt something shift inside her, a quiet but unmistakable resolve settling over the fear that had gripped her only moments before. She had spent 6 years accepting whatever judgment the pack passed down upon her, believing herself too insignificant to challenge any of it. But this, she realized, was different. This was not about her own worth or place within the hierarchy. This was about a small, innocent life that depended entirely on her willingness to protect him. "I understand pack law," she said, meeting Garrick's furious gaze without flinching, for perhaps the first time in her entire life. "But I could not leave him to die. Whatever consequence you decide to give me, I will accept it, but I will not apologize for saving him." The clearing fell utterly silent. Garrick stared at her, clearly unaccustomed to any form of defiance from the wolf he had spent years dismissing as insignificant. For a long, tense moment, no one moved, no one spoke, the entire pack holding its breath to see what would happen next. Garrick's silence stretched long enough that Luna wondered if he intended to act immediately, perhaps ordering her removal from the pack right there in front of everyone. Instead, he finally spoke, his voice low and controlled in a way that felt more dangerous than his earlier anger. "Bring the pup here," he said. "I want to see what has caused so much trouble." Luna's heart clenched at the thought of exposing Wisp to the pack's judgment, but she understood that refusal would only make matters worse. She nodded once, then turned and made her way toward the hollow, feeling the weight of many eyes following her departure. When she arrived, Wisp bounded out to greet her as he always did, his tail wagging with pure delight at her return. Luna crouched down beside him, pressing her nose gently against his fur, trying to memorize this small, private moment before the world beyond the hollow forced its way into their lives. "We have to go somewhere," she told him softly, though she knew he could not fully understand her words. "I need you to stay close to me and stay calm, no matter what happens." Wisp tilted his head at her, sensing perhaps that something serious weighed on her mind, but he trusted her enough to follow without hesitation as she led him carefully back toward the clearing where the pack waited. The walk felt longer than it ever had before. Every step brought them closer to a confrontation Luna could not predict the outcome of, and every instinct in her body screamed at her to turn around, to flee somewhere far from the judgment awaiting them both. But she pressed forward, because turning back was never truly an option she could consider. When they emerged into the clearing, a collective murmur rose from the assembled wolves at the sight of the small gray pup walking close beside Luna. Wisp pressed himself instinctively against her leg, sensing the unfamiliar tension radiating from every direction, his earlier confidence replaced by a nervous wariness that broke Luna's heart to witness. Garrick studied the pup with narrowed eyes, taking in every detail of his appearance, from the shape of his ears to the particular gray shade of his coat. Several other wolves leaned forward as well, examining him with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. "He carries the markings of the Thornwood pack," Fenwick said quietly, breaking the silence. "I would recognize that coloring anywhere. We have crossed paths with them before, during territory disputes years ago." Garrick's expression hardened further at this confirmation. "Then he is exactly what I feared. An enemy, brought willingly into our territory, nursed back to health by one of our own." "He is a pup," Luna said again, stepping slightly in front of Wisp in a protective gesture that seemed to surprise several of the watching wolves. "He knows nothing of territory disputes or old rivalries. He is simply a creature who needed help, and I gave it." "And in doing so," Garrick said, his voice rising with renewed anger, You have potentially exposed this entire pack to unnecessary risk. If the Thornwood pack learns their pup survived and is being kept here, they may see it as an act of aggression. They may retaliate. Did you consider any of that before making your decision? Luna had not considered it, not fully, not in those terms. Her decision that stormy night had been driven purely by instinct, by an inability to walk away from a helpless creature in need. She had not thought through the larger implications of what harboring a rival pack's pup might mean for the safety of Blackridge territory. I did not think that far ahead, she admitted honestly. I only knew that leaving him to freeze was something I could not do. Garrick studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Around them, the pack waited in tense silence, watching to see how their alpha would respond to this unprecedented situation. You have broken pack law, Garrick finally said. Whether your intentions were noble or not does not change that fact. There must be consequences. Luna braced herself, uncertain what punishment awaited her, but determined to accept whatever came without complaint, so long as it did not mean harm coming to Wisp. I will accept whatever consequence you decide, she said quietly, but I ask that you do not harm him. He has done nothing wrong. He is only a pup. Garrick's gaze shifted briefly to Wisp, who remained pressed against Luna's side, his small body trembling slightly with fear at the tension surrounding him. Something flickered across the alpha's expression, something that might have been the faintest trace of hesitation, though it vanished quickly beneath his usual stern authority. The pup will not be harmed, Garrick said finally, and Luna felt a wave of relief wash through her at those words. But he cannot remain within our territory. This pack has enough challenges without inviting further conflict by harboring the offspring of a rival group. Then what would you have me do? Luna asked, though she feared she already understood the answer forming in the alpha's mind. You will remove him from Blackridge land, Garrick said. Return him to wherever you found him, or release him somewhere far from here. Either way, he cannot stay, and if he is found within our borders again, there will be no mercy shown, regardless of his age. The words settled over Luna like a physical weight. She understood the logic behind Garrick's decision, understood the very real dangers that came with harboring a rival pack's pup. But the thought of abandoning Wisp now, after everything they had endured together, felt like an impossibility she could not accept. He cannot survive alone, she said, her voice tight, with barely controlled emotion. He is still too young. If I release him without protection, he will die just as certainly as if he had frozen during that storm. That is no longer this pack's concern, Garrick said, his tone final and unyielding. You made the choice to save him. The consequences of that choice are now yours to bear, not ours. Luna looked around at the gathered wolves, searching for any flicker of sympathy or support among the faces she had lived alongside for 6 long years. She found none. Most looked away, unwilling to meet her eyes, while others regarded her with expressions ranging from indifference to quiet disapproval. Even Bryony, who had first warned her of the pack's suspicion, offered nothing beyond a resigned shake of her head. There was no ally to be found here, no voice willing to speak on her behalf, or on Wisp's. She stood entirely alone, exactly as she had for so many years, except now, the stakes had grown far greater than simple loneliness. If he cannot stay, Luna said slowly, feeling the shape of an impossible decision forming in her mind, then I will go with him. A fresh murmur rippled through the assembled wolves at this declaration. Garrick's eyebrows lifted slightly, the first genuine surprise he had shown throughout the entire confrontation. You would leave the pack, he said, for the sake of an enemy pup. He is not my enemy, Luna said firmly. He never was, and I will not abandon him simply because staying would be more convenient for me. Garrick studied her for a long, silent moment, and Luna wondered if he intended to forbid her departure, to insist she remain, and complete whatever punishment he saw fit, regardless of her wishes. But instead, he simply nodded once, his expression settling into something that resembled resigned acceptance. Then go, he said. Take the pup and leave Blackridge territory. Do not return, and do not expect protection or assistance from this pack ever again. The finality in his words struck Luna harder than she expected, severing the last remaining thread connecting her to the only home she had ever known. 6 years of hardship, of loneliness, of enduring treatment she had long since stopped questioning, all coming to an end in this single, definitive moment. She looked down at Wisp, who gazed back up at her with wide, trusting eyes, entirely unaware of the magnitude of what had just occurred. Whatever fear or uncertainty churned within her, she pushed it aside, focusing instead on the small creature who depended entirely on her continued protection. "Thank you," she said quietly to Garrick, though gratitude was perhaps not quite the right word for what she felt, for allowing him to live. Garrick said nothing further, simply turning away, as the gathered pack began to disperse, their attention already shifting toward other matters, now that the confrontation had reached its conclusion. Luna watched them go, feeling the strange finality of the moment settle over her like a heavy blanket. She gathered herself, took one last look at the only home she had ever known, and turned toward the unfamiliar wilderness stretching beyond the borders of Blackridge territory. Wisp pressed close against her side, sensing perhaps that something significant had shifted in their circumstances, though he remained calm and trusting in her presence. "We will be all right," Luna murmured to him, though she could not be entirely certain of that promise. "We will find our way, together." With those words, she led him away from the clearing, away from the pack that had never truly valued her, and into an uncertain future that belonged now to the two of them alone. The land beyond Blackridge territory was unlike anything Luna had grown accustomed to. The trees stood taller here, their branches knitted so tightly overhead that sunlight barely reached the forest floor. The air carried unfamiliar scents, some sharp with the marking of other predators, others simply strange and unplaced, belonging to a wilderness she had never needed to understand before. She kept Wisp close as they walked, watching every shadow with heightened alertness. Out here, there was no pack to fall back on, no numbers to discourage would-be threats. It was only the two of them, a young wolf, still learning the world, and an Omega, who had spent her life being told she was worth very little. By midday, exhaustion had settled deep into Luna's muscles, and Wisp's small legs had begun to stumble more frequently over the uneven ground. She found a rocky outcrop offering some shelter from the wind, and guided him beneath it, allowing him to rest while she took stock of their situation. Food would be a challenge. Hunting alone was far more difficult than hunting as part of a coordinated pack, where multiple wolves worked together to corner and bring down prey too fast or too strong for a single hunter. Luna had never needed to master solitary hunting before, not truly, since even as an Omega she had always trailed behind a larger group during pursuits. She would need to learn quickly. That afternoon, she left Wisp resting safely beneath the outcrop and ventured out in search of anything that might sustain them. She found a stream nearby, its water running cold and clear despite the season, and along its banks she caught sight of small tracks belonging to rabbits or similar creatures. It was not much, but it was something. Her first attempt at catching prey alone ended in failure, the rabbit darting away before she could close the distance. Her second attempt fared little better. By her third try, hunger and frustration had sharpened her focus, and she finally succeeded in bringing down a small hare, though the effort left her breathing hard and her muscles trembling with fatigue. She carried her catch back to Wisp, who greeted her return with the same enthusiasm he always showed, seemingly unaware of how close they had come to going without food entirely. She allowed him the larger portion, watching him eat with quiet satisfaction despite her own hunger still gnawing at her stomach. Over the following days, this pattern repeated itself. Luna hunted alone, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, always ensuring Wisp received whatever food she managed to secure before considering her own needs. She found small shelters where she could, always testing each location carefully for signs of other predators before allowing Wisp to rest there. The forest held dangers beyond simple hunger. One evening, as dusk settled over their temporary camp, Luna caught the unmistakable scent of a large predator drifting on the breeze, something far bigger and more dangerous than the rabbits and small game she had grown accustomed to tracking. She quickly gathered Wisp close, guiding him into a narrow crevice between two boulders where his small size allowed him to fit easily, while she positioned herself at the entrance, ready to defend the space if necessary. The scent grew stronger, then faded, then grew stronger again, circling somewhere beyond the boulders, in a pattern that suggested curiosity rather than active hunting. Luna held perfectly still, every muscle tensed, prepared to fight if the moment demanded it, though she knew her chances against a creature significantly larger than herself would be slim at best. After what felt like an eternity, the scent finally faded entirely. The unseen predator, apparently losing interest, or moving on toward easier prey elsewhere in the forest. Luna allowed herself to breathe again, though she remained alert throughout the rest of the night, unwilling to risk letting her guard down, even after the immediate danger seemed to have passed. These close encounters became an unfortunate regularity in their new life. Without the safety of numbers that pack life provided, every day carried risks that Luna had never needed to consider so carefully before. She learned to read the forest with new intensity, noting every shift in scent, every unfamiliar sound, every subtle sign that danger might be lurking nearby. Despite the hardships, something remarkable was happening between Luna and Wisp during this difficult period. Freed from the constant judgment and hierarchy of pack life, their bond deepened in ways that would have been impossible within the rigid structure of Blackridge territory. Wisp no longer simply depended on Luna for survival. He began to look to her for guidance in everything, watching closely as she hunted, mimicking her movements during play, seeking her approval with an eagerness that filled her with quiet pride. Luna, in turn, found herself teaching him skills she had barely realized she possessed. She showed him how to move silently through underbrush, how to identify which plants along the forest floor were safe to investigate, and which carried warning scents best avoided. She demonstrated basic hunting postures, encouraging him to practice his crouch and pounce, praising his efforts, even when his young body could not yet execute the movements with any real success. As weeks passed, Wisp grew steadily stronger and more capable. His legs filled out with growing muscle. His senses sharpened, allowing him to detect scents and sounds that would have gone entirely unnoticed only a short time before. He began attempting small hunts of his own, chasing after insects and occasionally small rodents, with a determination that reminded Luna of her own early efforts at learning to survive without pack support. One particular afternoon stood out clearly in Luna's memory. They had settled near a small clearing where sunlight actually managed to break through the dense canopy above, warming the ground enough that Wisp had taken to rolling contentedly in the patch of light. Luna watched him from a short distance, her body finally relaxed after days of near-constant vigilance, and found herself experiencing something she had almost forgotten was possible. She was happy. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling after so many years of simply enduring her circumstances, rather than actively enjoying them. But here, in this quiet clearing, watching a pup she had chosen to save thrive despite every obstacle placed before them, Luna allowed herself to feel genuine contentment, for perhaps the first time since her mother's passing. That contentment was tested again only days later, when a sudden storm forced them to seek emergency shelter in an unfamiliar cave system Luna had not previously explored. The cave proved deeper and more complex than she anticipated, its passages branching in multiple directions, some leading further into darkness than she felt comfortable exploring without more thorough investigation. As they settled near the entrance, waiting for the storm to pass, Luna heard something stirring deeper within the cave, a low, rhythmic breathing pattern that suggested another creature already occupied this space, likely resting undisturbed until their arrival had interrupted its peace. She quickly ushered Wisp back toward the entrance, deciding that braving the storm outside carried less risk than remaining within a space already claimed by an unknown resident. They emerged back into the driving rain, finding what shelter they could beneath a nearby rock formation instead, soaked and shivering, but safely away from whatever had been sleeping within those cave passages. Such moments served as constant reminders that their new life, free from the judgment of Blackridge Pack though it was, came with its own particular set of dangers. Every day required careful navigation of an unfamiliar and often hostile wilderness, with no reinforcements to call upon should things go wrong. Yet through it all, Luna found herself growing more confident, more capable, more certain of her ability to provide for both herself and the pup who had become, in every way that mattered, her own. The Omega who had once believed herself the least valuable member of any pack, was proving, day after day, that she possessed far more strength and resourcefulness than anyone at Blackridge had ever given her credit for. Wisp, for his part, seemed to sense this transformation in her, his trust and devotion growing deeper with each passing week. He no longer simply followed her out of necessity, he followed her because he wanted to, because somewhere along their difficult journey together, Luna had become the center of his entire world, just as he had become the center of hers. As the season began to shift, bringing slightly warmer air and the first faint signs of approaching spring, Luna allowed herself to consider, for the first time, whether this new life she and Wisp had built together might not be temporary after all. Perhaps this was simply how things would remain, the two of them navigating the wilderness together, relying on nothing but each other, and the skills they continued to develop with each passing day. She could not have known, as she watched Wisp chase a fluttering leaf across their small clearing with clumsy enthusiasm, that their quiet existence was about to be disrupted once again, this time by forces neither of them could have anticipated. Spring arrived slowly across the wilderness, coaxing the frozen ground into softness and drawing new growth up through the melting snow. With the changing season came changing behavior in the creatures around them, and Luna noticed the shift immediately in the way sounds carried differently through air, no longer thick with winter's silence. Wisp had grown considerably over the preceding months. What had once been a fragile, freezing pup, barely clinging to life, was now a sturdy, alert young wolf, his movements growing more confident with each passing week. His voice had changed as well, deepening slightly from the thin cries of his earliest days into something that carried further across open ground. It was this change in his voice that Luna noticed most acutely one evening, as they settled near a ridge overlooking a wide, open valley. Wisp had taken to practicing his howl in recent weeks, small experimental sounds that rarely carried far beyond their immediate surroundings. But on this particular evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began appearing overhead, his howl rang out with unexpected strength and clarity. Luna watched him with quiet pride, appreciating how far he had come since that desperate night in the storm. She did not immediately consider the implications of a howl carrying so clearly across such a wide expanse of territory. It was only afterward, lying beside him as he settled into sleep, that a flicker of unease crossed her mind. If his howl could carry that far, it might reach ears beyond their own small world. Ears that might recognize something familiar in its particular tone and rhythm. She pushed the thought aside for the moment, telling herself that the chances of any wolf from Wisp's original pack still searching this far from where she had found him were slim at best. Months had passed since that storm. Surely any search for a lost pup would have ended long ago, the Thornwood pack assuming the worst and moving on with their lives, just as she and Wisp had moved on with theirs. But over the following days, Luna found herself paying closer attention to Wisp's howls, noticing how they had developed a particular quality, a specific rhythm and pitch that felt almost like a signature unique to him. She wondered, with growing unease, whether that signature might be recognizable to those who had known him before the storm separated him from his family. Her unease proved justified sooner than she expected. It happened on a clear morning, several days after that first strong howl on the ridge. Luna had left Wisp resting near their current shelter while she ventured out to hunt, following a promising scent trail that led her further from their camp than she typically preferred to travel. She was crouched low, focused entirely on stalking a rabbit through thick undergrowth, when a sound reached her ears that made every muscle in her body freeze in place. It was a howl, distant but unmistakable, and it carried a quality achingly similar to the one Wisp had been practicing in recent days. Luna abandoned her hunt immediately, racing back toward their shelter with her heart pounding against her ribs. She found Wisp exactly where she had left him, curled up peacefully in the shade, entirely unaware of the distant sound that had sent Luna into a panic. She settled beside him, forcing herself to breathe evenly, trying to convince herself that the howl she had heard belonged to some unrelated wolf, unconnected to Wisp's past. But deep down, she suspected otherwise, and that suspicion gnawed at her peace of mind for the remainder of the day. Over the following week, the distant howls continued, growing gradually closer with each passing day. Luna began to recognize a pattern in them, almost like a call being sent out repeatedly in hopes of receiving a response. She wondered, with a mixture of hope and dread, whether these howls belonged to wolves, still actively searching for a pup lost during that storm so many months ago. She considered, more than once, whether she should move their camp further away, putting additional distance between themselves and whatever was approaching. But something held her back from making that decision, some quiet instinct suggesting that running from this particular threat might not be the wisest course of action. Wisp, meanwhile, had begun responding to the distant howls with calls of his own, an instinctive behavior Luna could not easily discourage, without risking damage to the natural confidence he had worked so hard to develop. Each time he howled, the response from the distant wolves seemed to grow more urgent, more focused, as though they had caught scent of something significant in his particular voice. Luna understood, with growing certainty, that whoever was out there searching had likely identified Wisp's howl as belonging to someone connected to them. The question that remained was what would happen when that search finally led them directly to her and Wisp's shared camp. She spent sleepless nights considering every possible outcome. Perhaps the approaching wolves belonged to a search party sent by the Thornwood pack, driven by grief and determination to recover a lost family member, even after all this time. Perhaps they would react with hostility upon finding Wisp in the care of a wolf from a rival territory, viewing her involvement with suspicion rather than gratitude. Or perhaps, in the best possible outcome, they would simply be relieved to find him alive and would allow the reunion to proceed peacefully. There was no way to know for certain which scenario awaited them, and that uncertainty weighed heavily on Luna as the howls continued drawing closer with each passing day. She considered, briefly, attempting to intercept whoever was searching before they reached their camp, hoping to explain the situation calmly before any confrontation could escalate into something more dangerous. But the risk of approaching unknown wolves alone, without any indication of their temperament or intentions, felt too significant to attempt. Instead, she focused on preparing herself and Wisp as best she could for whatever encounter awaited them. She reinforced the boundaries of their small camp, identifying clear escape routes should things turn hostile. She practiced staying close to Wisp during moments of uncertainty, ensuring she could shield him quickly if danger presented itself. Wisp, unaware of the complicated emotions churning within Luna, continued growing more curious and vocal with each passing day. His howls grew stronger, more confident, clearly audible even from considerable distances. Luna watched him call out toward the unseen wolves approaching their territory, torn between pride in how far he had come and fear of what his growing strength might soon bring upon them both. One evening, as dusk settled over their camp, Wisp let out a particularly long, clear howl that echoed across the valley with striking resonance. Almost immediately, an answering call rose from somewhere much closer than any previous response, close enough that Luna could tell, with absolute certainty, that whoever was searching had finally closed the distance separating them. Her heart pounded as she gathered Wisp close, positioning herself protectively at his side, while scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. The forest around them had grown unnaturally quiet, as though every creature within it sensed the significance of the moment approaching. Then, from the shadows between the trees, shapes began to emerge. 4 of them, moving with deliberate purpose, their eyes fixed intently on the small clearing, where Luna stood protectively, beside the pup she had raised through months of hardship and uncertainty. Luna's breath caught in her throat as the 4 wolves drew closer, their expressions unreadable in the fading evening light. She had no way of knowing, in this critical moment, whether she was about to witness a joyful reunion or face a confrontation that could threaten everything she and Wisp had built together. Whatever was about to happen, she understood there was no turning back now. The search that had been drawing closer for days had finally reached them, and the outcome of this encounter would determine everything that followed. The 4 wolves stopped at the edge of the clearing, close enough now that Luna could make out details of their appearance in the fading light. 3 of them were fully grown, their builds lean and powerful, clearly experienced hunters accustomed to covering long distances. The 4th was smaller, though still larger than Wisp, perhaps a young adult not far removed from his own pup years. Luna positioned herself firmly between the newcomers and Wisp, every muscle tensed and ready to react should the situation turn hostile. Beside her, Wisp had gone still as well, his earlier confidence replaced by wary uncertainty as he studied the unfamiliar wolves with wide eyes. The largest of the 4, a wolf with a dark, almost black coat and pale amber eyes, stepped forward slightly ahead of the others. His gaze moved from Luna to Wisp and back again, something complicated flickering across his expression that Luna could not immediately interpret. "That howl," the dark-coated wolf said finally, his voice carrying a rough quality that suggested long use, perhaps from calling out across considerable distances during an extended search. "We have been tracking it for weeks." "I know," Luna said carefully, keeping her body positioned protectively in front of Wisp. "I heard your calls as well." The wolf's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied her more closely, taking in details of her appearance, her scent, the way she stood guard over the pup beside her. "You are not from Thornwood," he said. It was not quite a question, more an observation, offered with cautious uncertainty. "No," Luna confirmed. "I found him during a storm, many months ago. He was alone, freezing, separated from whatever pack he belonged to. At this, one of the other wolves, a female with a lighter gray coat, let out a soft sound that seemed to catch somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. She stepped forward slightly, her attention fixed entirely on Wisp, her expression shifting through disbelief and something that looked remarkably like desperate hope. "Rowan," she said softly, and Luna watched as Wisp's ears perked up at the sound of what was apparently his true name, one he had not heard spoken aloud since before that fateful storm separated him from everything he had once known. Wisp, or Rowan as this unfamiliar wolf had called him, tilted his head with obvious confusion, clearly sensing something significant in her tone, but lacking any conscious memory to attach meaning to the name itself. "His name is Rowan," the gray-coated female said, turning her attention toward Luna, her voice tight with emotion. "He is my brother's pup. We lost him during a storm months ago, separated from the rest of us when the weather turned violent without warning. We searched everywhere. We had nearly given up hope of ever finding him alive." Luna felt something loosen slightly in her chest at these words, though she remained cautious, unwilling to let her guard down entirely, until she understood the full intentions of these 4 wolves standing before her. "He was nearly gone when I found him," Luna said quietly. "Buried in snow, too weak to move much further. I could not simply leave him there." The dark-coated wolf who had spoken first studied her with renewed intensity, something in his expression softening slightly at her words, though wariness still lingered clearly in his posture. "You brought him back from the edge of death," he said, "and yet you are not part of any pack we recognize. Why would you take such a risk for a pup with no connection to you?" Luna considered the question carefully before answering, understanding that her response would likely shape everything that followed in this encounter. "I was an Omega," she said finally, "the lowest-ranked wolf in my former pack. I understood, in a way perhaps others could not, what it felt like to be considered worthless, to be left behind when it mattered most. I could not do that to him, regardless of what pack he came from." Something shifted visibly in the expressions of all 4 wolves at this admission. The younger one, who had remained silent throughout the exchange thus far, finally spoke, his voice carrying a mixture of curiosity and cautious respect. "You were exiled for saving him," he said, "weren't you? That is why you are out here alone, without a pack of your own." Luna nodded slowly. "My former alpha decided that harboring a pup from a rival pack presented too great a risk. I was given a choice between abandoning him or leaving Blackridge territory entirely. I chose to leave." The gray-coated female, whose name Luna had not yet learned, moved closer still, her attention shifting entirely toward Wisp now. She lowered herself carefully, bringing her posture level with his, studying his face with an intensity that suggested she was searching for traces of a resemblance only she could fully recognize. "You look so much like your father," she murmured softly, more to herself than to anyone else present. "He never stopped searching for you. Not once. Not for a single day since that storm took you from us." Wisp remained cautious, uncertain how to respond to this unfamiliar wolf who clearly recognized him despite his own lack of memory regarding their connection. He glanced toward Luna, seeking reassurance, and she offered a small, encouraging nod, silently letting him know it was safe to approach if he chose to. Slowly, tentatively, Wisp took a step toward the gray-coated female, his nose extending forward to catch her scent more fully. Whatever he detected in that scent seemed to trigger some deep, instinctive recognition, because his posture gradually relaxed, his initial wariness giving way to cautious curiosity. "I am your aunt," the female said softly, watching him with evident emotion. "My name is Sable. This is Ashford," she continued, gesturing toward the dark-coated wolf who had spoken first. "Your father's closest companion, and one of our pack's most trusted hunters. And this," she added, indicating the younger wolf, "is Cedric, your older cousin." Luna watched this exchange with a complicated mixture of emotions swirling within her. Relief that these wolves appeared genuinely connected to Wisp, rather than hostile intruders. Uncertainty about what this reunion might mean for the bond she and Wisp had built together over these past difficult months. And an unexpected pang of something that felt almost like loss, anticipating a future where Wisp might return to his original family, leaving her once again alone in this vast, uncertain wilderness. Ashford turned his attention back toward Luna, his expression carrying newfound respect that had not been present during his initial approach. "You saved the life of our Alpha's only son," he said, his voice measured but sincere. "Wolfram has searched for this pup every single day since the storm took him. He refused to accept that Rowan might be gone, even when others within our pack had begun to lose hope." "Wolfram," Luna repeated, understanding now that this must be Wisp's father, the Alpha of whatever pack he had originally belonged to. "He is currently searching further north," Cedric explained, following a lead that proved false. "We split into separate search parties weeks ago, covering different territories in hopes of finally locating some trace of Rowan. When we heard his howl carrying across this valley, we knew immediately it required investigation." Luna absorbed this information carefully, understanding now the full scope of what had unfolded over these past months. An entire pack, driven by grief and determination, had continued searching tirelessly for a single lost pup, refusing to give up hope, even as time passed without any sign of success. "What happens now?" Luna asked finally, voicing the question that had been weighing on her mind since these four wolves first emerged from the tree line. Sable looked up from where she remained crouched beside Wisp, her expression carrying a complicated mixture of joy and uncertainty, as she considered how best to answer this question. "Wolfram must know his son has been found," she said. "We need to send word immediately, and bring Rowan back to reunite with his father as soon as possible." Luna nodded, understanding the necessity of this reunion despite the ache it caused within her own chest. Wisp deserved to know his true family, deserved the chance to grow up among wolves connected to him by blood and history, even if that meant Luna's own role in his life would need to change significantly. "I will not stand in the way of that reunion," Luna said, though her voice carried a note of sadness she could not entirely hide. Ashford studied her closely, something thoughtful crossing his expression as he considered her words. "You misunderstand," he said slowly. "We are not here simply to take him from you." Luna blinked, uncertain she had heard correctly. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously, her earlier relief mixing now with fresh confusion. Ashford exchanged a glance with Sable before continuing. "Rowan clearly trusts you completely. Anyone can see that in the way he stays close to your side, in the way he looked to you for reassurance before approaching Sable moments ago. Taking him from you abruptly, severing that bond without consideration, would cause him unnecessary distress after everything he has already endured." Sable nodded in agreement, rising from her crouched position beside Wisp to address Luna more directly. "You saved his life. You raised him through months when he had no one else to depend upon. Whatever happens next, that sacrifice deserves recognition, not dismissal." "What are you suggesting?" Luna asked, hardly daring to hope for whatever possibilities seemed to be forming in the minds of these four wolves before her. Cedric, who had remained mostly quiet throughout the exchange, spoke up with evident enthusiasm. "Come with us, travel to where our pack is currently gathered, and let Wolfram see for himself what you have done for his son. Let him decide, alongside all of us, what happens from here." Luna hesitated, considering the implications of this suggestion. Traveling with four unfamiliar wolves toward a pack she knew nothing about carried obvious risks, particularly given her own vulnerable status as an exile, with no pack of her own to fall back upon should things go poorly. But the alternative, remaining behind while Wisp departed with his newfound family, felt like a wound she was not prepared to accept, without at least attempting some other path forward. "I need to consider this carefully," Luna said finally, glancing down at Wisp, who had settled calmly beside her, despite the unfamiliar wolves surrounding them. "This is not a decision I can make quickly." Ashford nodded with evident understanding. "We do not expect an immediate answer. But know this," he added, his tone carrying genuine sincerity. "Whatever choice you make, our gratitude toward you will remain unchanged. You gave Rowan a chance at life when the world had seemingly turned against him. That is not something easily forgotten." They made camp together that evening, an uneasy but increasingly comfortable arrangement, as the initial tension between strangers gradually gave way to cautious familiarity. Luna watched carefully as Wisp interacted with his newfound family members, noting the way his confidence grew steadily as he became more accustomed to their presence, his instinctive recognition of shared blood becoming more apparent with each passing hour. Sable spent considerable time beside Luna as the evening progressed, sharing stories about Wolfram's relentless search efforts, about the pack's grief following Rowan's disappearance, about the joy that would surely follow once word of his safe recovery reached the rest of their group. Through these stories, Luna began to understand more fully the depth of loss this pack had experienced, and the magnitude of what she had inadvertently given back to them by choosing to save a helpless pup during that violent storm so many months ago. "Your pack sounds very different from mine," Luna observed at one point, watching as Cedric engaged Wisp in playful wrestling nearby, their laughter carrying easily across the small camp. "Different how?" Sable asked curiously. "Warmer," Luna said simply. "More willing to accept those who might be considered different or unwanted elsewhere." Sable studied her for a long moment before responding. "Wolfram believes strongly that a pack's strength comes from unity, not hierarchy. He has little patience for the kind of rigid ranking systems that leave certain members feeling worthless or expendable. Perhaps that is part of why he has searched so tirelessly for Rowan, refusing to accept that any member of our pack, regardless of age or standing, should simply be abandoned to fate." These words settled deeply within Luna, offering a glimpse of a philosophy entirely foreign to everything she had experienced during her years within Blackridge territory. The thought that a pack might value every member equally, regardless of birth or circumstance, felt almost too foreign to fully comprehend. As the night deepened and the others settled into sleep, Luna remained awake, watching Wisp rest peacefully between herself and Sable, his small body finding comfort in the presence of both his rescuer and his newly discovered family. She thought about the path that had led them to this moment, from that desperate storm-swept night when she first found him abandoned in the snow, through months of difficult solitary survival, to this unexpected reunion with wolves who genuinely seemed to care about honoring the sacrifice she had made. She thought, too, about what awaited them should she choose to accompany Rowan and his family back to their pack. Would she truly find acceptance among strangers, or would her status as an exile from a rival pack mark her permanently as an outsider, regardless of the goodwill currently being extended toward her? There was no way to know for certain, not without taking the risk of finding out directly, and as she watched Wisp's peaceful sleeping form, curled contentedly between herself and Sable, Luna understood that whatever uncertainty lay ahead, she was not prepared to simply disappear from his life now, not after everything they had endured together to reach this point. Morning arrived with a soft golden light filtering through the trees, and Luna woke to find Wisp already awake, engaged in quiet conversation with Cedric about details of pack life Luna herself knew nothing about. Watching him interact so naturally with his cousin, absorbing information about a heritage he had never known existed, filled her with a complicated swirl of emotions she struggled to fully untangle. Ashford approached her, as the camp began stirring fully awake, his expression carrying the same measured respect he had shown throughout the previous evening. "We will begin traveling toward our pack's current gathering point today," he said. "The journey will take perhaps 2 days, depending on the terrain we encounter. And if I choose to come with you," Luna said, watching him carefully for any sign of hesitation or reluctance, "what should I expect upon arrival?" "Wolfram will want to speak with you directly," Ashford said honestly. "He will want to understand everything that happened, every detail of how his son survived and thrived under your care. Beyond that, I cannot promise exactly what will unfold, though I believe, based on everything I have witnessed here, that his gratitude will far outweigh any lingering caution regarding your former pack affiliation." Luna considered this carefully, weighing the uncertainty of the path ahead against the certainty of what she would lose by choosing not to accompany them. In the end, watching Wisp glance toward her with those same trusting eyes that had first convinced her to save him during that storm so long ago, she understood there was really only one choice available to her. "I will come with you," she said finally, feeling a strange mixture of apprehension and hope settle over her as the words left her mouth. Wisp's tail began wagging enthusiastically at this decision, and he trotted over to press himself against her side, as though sensing that whatever uncertain future awaited them, they would face it together, exactly as they had faced every challenge since that fateful night when their paths first crossed. With that decision made, the small group began preparing to depart, gathering themselves for the journey ahead that would lead Luna toward a pack she knew nothing about, carrying with her nothing but the bond she had built with a pup who had once been nothing more than a stranger's abandoned child, and who had since become the center of her entire world. The journey toward the Thornwood Pack's gathering point proved more demanding than Luna had anticipated. The terrain shifted from dense forest into rocky highlands, forcing the group to navigate carefully around steep inclines and loose stone that threatened footing with every step. Wisp, despite his growing strength, still tired more easily than the fully grown wolves accompanying them, and the group adjusted their pace accordingly, stopping frequently to allow him rest. Throughout the journey, Luna found herself observing the dynamics between Ashford, Sable, and Cedric with growing interest. Unlike the strict hierarchy she had known within Blackridge, these three interacted with an easy familiarity that suggested mutual respect rather than rigid rank. Decisions about route and pace seemed to emerge from genuine discussion rather than simple deference to whoever held the highest standing. "How does your pack decide who leads a hunt?" Luna asked Sable during a brief rest along the second day of travel, curiosity finally overcoming her hesitation to ask questions about a pack structure so foreign to her experience. "Whoever has the most relevant skill for that particular hunt," Sable replied, as though the answer were obvious. "If we are tracking through dense brush, Cedric often leads, since his senses are sharpest in close quarters. If we need speed across open ground, Ashford typically takes point. Wolfram believes forcing every decision through a single hierarchy wastes the strengths each individual wolf brings to the pack." Luna absorbed this information quietly, comparing it against years of watching Garrick make every significant decision unilaterally, regardless of whether his judgment actually represented the wisest choice available. The contrast left her with a strange, unfamiliar sense of possibility, a glimpse of what pack life might look like when structured around genuine cooperation, rather than rigid dominance. By the afternoon of the second day, the group crested a final ridge, and Sable let out a soft sound of relief at the sight spread before them. Below, nestled within a wide valley bordered by a winding river, lay signs of an active pack encampment, wolves moving between shelters, constructed from fallen branches and natural rock formations. "We are close now," Ashford said, his pace quickening slightly with evident anticipation. Wisp, sensing the shift in energy among his companions, pressed closer to Luna's side, his earlier confidence giving way momentarily to nervous uncertainty as they approached this unfamiliar gathering of wolves who would soon learn of his miraculous survival. "Whatever happens," Luna murmured to him softly, "I will be right beside you." As they descended into the valley, word of their approach seemed to spread quickly among the gathered wolves. Several broke away from their current activities, moving toward the group with expressions of curious anticipation, though none yet seemed to recognize the significance of the small pup traveling alongside Sable, Ashford, and Cedric. Then, from among the shelters near the center of the encampment, a large wolf emerged, his coat a deep russet color streaked with gray along his muzzle, his posture carrying the unmistakable authority of leadership despite the visible exhaustion etched into his features. His eyes swept across the approaching group, and Luna watched as recognition dawned slowly across his face, his entire body going rigid with disbelief. "Rowan," he breathed, the single word carrying such raw emotion that it seemed to still the entire encampment around them. Wisp hesitated only a moment before something instinctive took hold, and he broke away from Luna's side, moving toward the russet-colored wolf with growing confidence, despite having no conscious memory of their connection. The wolf, who Luna now understood must be Wolfram, closed the remaining distance in a few swift strides, lowering himself to press his nose against his son's fur with a tenderness that spoke of months of desperate hope finally realized. The surrounding pack members watched this reunion with expressions ranging from shock to overwhelming joy, murmurs of disbelief rippling through the gathered wolves, as word spread that their alpha's long-lost son had somehow returned to them after all this time. Wolfram lifted his head after several long moments, his eyes glistening with an emotion too powerful to fully contain, and turned his attention toward the group who had brought his son home. His gaze settled on Luna, standing somewhat apart from the others, uncertain of her welcome within this unfamiliar gathering. "Who is this?" Wolfram asked, his voice still thick with emotion, though curiosity now colored his tone as well. Ashford stepped forward to answer, before Luna could speak for herself. "This is the wolf who saved him," he said simply. "She found Rowan during the storm that separated him from us, nursed him back to health, and has cared for him faithfully, every day since." Wolfram's attention returned to Luna with renewed intensity, studying her with an expression she could not immediately interpret. She held herself steady beneath his scrutiny, uncertain what judgment awaited her, but determined to face it without flinching. exactly as she had faced Garrick's judgment those many months ago. "You saved my son," Wolfram said slowly, each word measured and deliberate. "I could not leave him," Luna said honestly. "He was helpless. Whatever pack he belonged to did not matter to me in that moment. He needed help, and I was the one who found him." Wolfram approached her slowly, his massive frame casting a long shadow as he closed the distance between them. For a moment, Luna wondered if she had misjudged the situation entirely, if perhaps this powerful alpha harbored some resentment toward the wolf, who had raised his son outside the traditions and territory of his own pack. But when he finally spoke, his voice carried nothing but profound gratitude. "I searched every single day," Wolfram said, refusing to accept that he might be gone. "Many within my own pack believed I clung to false hope, that continuing to search served no purpose beyond delaying necessary grief. But something told me he was still alive, still out there somewhere, waiting to be found." "He is stronger now than he was that first night," Luna said. "Braver too. He has learned to hunt, to move quietly through the forest, to recognize dangers before they become threats." Wolfram's gaze shifted briefly toward his son, who stood proudly beside him, clearly eager to demonstrate everything Luna had taught him during their months together. Pride mixed visibly with gratitude in the alpha's expression, as he considered how far his son had come under the care of a wolf who owed him and his pack nothing at all. "You gave up everything to save him," Wolfram said, turning his attention back to Luna. "Ashford tells me you were exiled from your own pack for this choice." "I was an Omega there," Luna said simply. "I had little to lose in comparison to what I would have lost by abandoning him." Wolfram studied her for a long, searching moment, and Luna felt the weight of his consideration pressing down upon her, uncertain what decision he might reach regarding her fate within his territory. Around them, the gathered pack members watched with rapt attention, clearly sensing the significance of whatever judgment their alpha was preparing to deliver. "An Omega," Wolfram repeated thoughtfully, something almost like disbelief coloring his tone. "The lowest-ranked wolf within your former pack chose to risk everything, including her own safety and standing, to save a pup she had no obligation to protect. That tells me more about your character than any rank or title ever could." Luna remained silent, uncertain how to respond to words so different from anything she had heard directed at her during her years within Blackridge territory. Wolfram turned to address the gathered pack, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled wolves. "This wolf saved my son's life when he had no one else to depend upon. She raised him through months of hardship, teaching him skills that allowed him to survive in a wilderness that shows mercy to no one. She sacrificed her own place within her pack, accepted exile without hesitation, because she refused to abandon a helpless creature simply because the rules of territory and rivalry demanded she do so." A murmur of appreciation rippled through the gathered wolves, many exchanging glances that carried newfound respect for the quiet, unassuming wolf standing before them. "Such courage and compassion," Wolfram continued, "deserve more than simple gratitude. They deserve a place among us, should she wish to accept it." Luna felt her breath catch at these words, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You are offering me a place within your pack," she said slowly, needing to hear the offer confirmed directly before allowing herself to believe it fully. "I am offering you exactly that," Wolfram confirmed, his expression warm with genuine sincerity. "Not as an Omega, not as someone occupying the lowest rank simply tolerated by the rest of us, but as a valued member, whose courage has already proven itself beyond question. You would have a voice here, a place at the center of our pack rather than its edges." Luna looked toward Wisp, who watched her with hopeful anticipation, clearly eager for her to accept this offer, that would allow their bond to continue uninterrupted within the context of his true family. Beside him, Sable, Ashford, and Cedric all wore expressions of genuine welcome, having already come to respect and appreciate everything Luna had sacrificed to bring their lost pup safely home. "I accept," Luna said finally, her voice steady, despite the overwhelming emotion churning within her chest. "Thank you for seeing value in what I did, when so many others would have condemned it." Wolfram inclined his head respectfully. "Compassion should never be condemned," he said. "It should be celebrated, especially when it comes from those willing to sacrifice everything for a life they had no obligation to save." That evening, the Thornwood pack held a celebration unlike anything Luna had ever witnessed during her years within Blackridge territory. Wolves gathered around a central clearing, sharing food freely among themselves regardless of rank or standing, exchanging stories and laughter late into the night as they celebrated the miraculous return of their alpha's lost son and welcomed the wolf responsible for his survival into their fold. Luna found herself seated near the center of this gathering, a position she had never once occupied during her time as an Omega, surrounded by wolves who treated her with genuine warmth rather than dismissive indifference. Wisp remained close beside her throughout the celebration, occasionally darting off to play with Cedric or explore some new corner of his family's territory, always returning to press affectionately against her side, as though reassuring himself that she remained present and unchanged, despite the significant shift in their circumstances. As the celebration wound down and the pack began settling for the night, Wolfram approached Luna once more, his expression carrying a quiet warmth that had replaced the initial intensity of their earlier meeting. "You gave my son a second chance at life," he said softly. "In return, I hope you will find here everything that was denied to you within your former pack, a place where your worth is recognized, where your voice matters, where you will never again need to sleep alone in the cold, while others find warmth just beyond your reach." Luna felt tears gathering, though she blinked them back, unaccustomed to expressing such raw emotion so openly, after years of learning to suppress every feeling that might mark her as weak or vulnerable. "Thank you," she said simply, though the words felt insufficient to capture the depth of gratitude swelling within her chest. In the days and weeks that followed, Luna settled gradually into her new life among the Thornwood pack, discovering with each passing day the truth of Wolfram's promise. She was consulted on decisions affecting the pack's welfare. She hunted alongside wolves who valued her skill and contribution, rather than relegating her to the least favorable position. She slept, each night, surrounded by warmth and companionship, rather than isolated at the edges of a den that had never truly welcomed her. Wisp continued growing under the combined guidance of his father, his newfound family, and Luna herself, developing into a confident young wolf who carried the lessons of survival she had taught him, alongside the deep sense of belonging that came from finally understanding his true heritage. He never forgot, even as he grew older, that it was Luna who had saved him during that desperate storm, and their bond remained as strong as it had been during those difficult early months of his life. Word of Luna's story spread slowly beyond the borders of Thornwood territory, carried by wolves who had witnessed her courage and compassion firsthand. In time, even distant packs came to know the tale of the Omega, who had sacrificed everything to save an enemy's pup, only to find, in the end, a family and a home far greater than anything she had left behind. Luna never returned to Blackridge territory, never sought out Garrick or any of the wolves who had once dismissed her as worthless. She had no need to. She had found, among strangers who became family, everything that had been denied to her for 6 long years, proving that sometimes the greatest rewards come not from following the rules others set before us, but from following the simple, unwavering call of compassion, regardless of where that call might lead. And so, in the wide valley bordered by a winding river, surrounded by a pack that valued her completely, Luna finally found the place she had always deserved, not as the lowest of the low, but as a wolf whose courage had brought 4 searching wolves to her door, and had, in turn, brought her home.